from near the Lithuanian-Polish border. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping to start off with. It's a live chat, and I wouldn't say I was in the middle of nowhere, but I'm somewhere close to the middle of nowhere. But in the middle of nowhere, there's been a lot of guests. Now, I am using my own internet here, is the one that comes with my cellular provider. It's not a Wi-Fi, but because there's lots of people around, which normally isn't here, this means to say that there may be some problems with the reception. So if there is, then please let me know. There's not much I can do about it. Strangely, if there is actually Wi-Fi here, which I have access to as well, but I think in view of the fact there's swarms of people have just descended upon this place, then that may mean that I don't really, the Wi-Fi will be even worse. Now, another little bit of news here, because I was planning to go up to Estonia. I was planning to go to I really wanted to go to Narva. I want to go to Narva. Unfortunately, there was a little incident last Friday. I went out on my bicycle and I started cycling towards the Lithuanian border. On my way there, I got attacked by a pack of dogs, and unfortunately, I got bitten. And I now have to keep going to the hospital. I've got to go to the hospital twice a week for rabies injections. And so so that one there's come to an end. So that means to say I'll be in the area of Suwałki until the first week of August, anyway, when the hospital treatment ends. Anyway, there you go. There's a little bit of news from me. I'll do a separate video on this dog attack, and today I'm going to talk about the Black Reichswehr. And now, if we go back 102 years nearly, and to the autumn of 1923, and so we think about the situation then, and there is, we think of the nascent German democracy. They got rid of the Kaiser. Well, the Kaiser got rid of himself. There's now a democratic government there, but there's all sorts of threats to it. And if you sort of said to anyone, what is the biggest threat? And you'd say this, based on hindsight, you'd say it was a silly looking Austrian with a funny name, a funny walk, and one testicle. You'd say he was the biggest risk, but he wasn't. And we know that because we know this from history, because we know that history took the Beerhall Putsch, which took place on the 9th of November 1923. But there was a far more serious putsch attempt only a few weeks ago, which has been, I don't want to say it was forgotten by history, but there's not much information on it. On the 1st of October 1923, some soldiers, just some, not a lot, some soldiers in the garrison at Kustrin. Now that's the day, Kustrin. Kustrin is today Kostrzyn in Poland. It's on the Oder River, but it's only about 70 kilometers from Berlin, something like that. And the garrison city, there was a big battle there in February of 1945. But the garrison there, part of the garrison actually revolted, and the person in charge of this putsch was one Major Bruno Ernst Buchrucker. Arrest warrant had been issued against him the previous day, and according to what he said later, when he found out about the arrest warrant, he ordered the work commandos under his, he was the boss of, who were housed in the outer fortresses of the Kustrin fortress, to move into the old town and take over the military fortifications the following morning. Buchrucker then went up, he arranged this. Buchrucker went up to the fortress commander. He pointed out that he outnumbered him, and he asked the commander not to stand in his way. The great national movement has now come. Well, Hitler used a similar word 6 weeks there or so later. He also claimed that he would strike not only here in Kustrin, but also everywhere at the same time. Now, the commander thought this is a bit ridiculous. He didn't side with Buchrucker, and then people thought Buchrucker, the people under him thought that Buchrucker was going to lead this putsch by himself, but at that moment he hadn't planned beyond storming into the commandant's office. He didn't know what he did to do. He found himself in charge. Then he froze, and some of the people under him went over to the other side because they could clearly see that Buchrucker didn't have a clue what he was going to do. And the German army, the Reichswehr, the normal army, crushed the uprising, and in fact they used firearms. One person was killed, 7 were injured. But at the same time, it needs to be pointed out that in Spandau there was also a revolt, and in this revolt, this was also they surrendered without a fight, and this was the end of this putsch. Now, just think of this: only 5 weeks later, Hitler, the beer hall putsch, which is quite ridiculous, really, if you think about it. The beer hall putsch, they're taking over a drinking establishment in Munich with 1 or 2 local dignitaries inside, and from there they planned to march on Berlin, and it's quite a long way from Munich to Berlin, should you want to try it. So, but an important thing that happened 2 weeks before the beer hall putsch was from the 22nd to the 27th of October 1923. A closed-door trial took place in Cottbus. Cottbus is to the south east of Berlin, against 14, not so far from Kufstein, against 14 of the putschists, and 10 of whom were convicted. And Buchrucker got 10 years imprisonment, and he got a fine of 10 gold marks. And Hans Hein, another one of the leaders, got 8 months, but the rest of them got next to nothing. I mean, 8 months isn't very much considering what he was actually doing. And the imprisonment sentence were less than 6 months. And majority of those involved in this putsch, even though their names were known, they went unpublished. Now, this trial itself was held in secret, but the newspapers found out about it, and thus the name of the secret army, the secret of the secret army, which wasn't so secret, came out. It was what's called the Black Reichswehr. And in this video, on this little talk here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, because what's important about this secret army, which was funded by the state, funded by the German state, and the people at the top knew all about it, was that they actually were funding an organization which was plotting to remove the government of Germany, and indeed formed the nucleus of the future National Socialist state, which came about some nine and a half years more or less after this attempted putsch. Now, things in many videos are actually referred to the Black Reichswehr when I've talked about people's backgrounds and things like this. The Black Reichswehr was a secret army, or it was part of a German army called the Reichswehr, and this existed in contravention of the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Now, what had happened in Germany is immediately after the First World War, a lot of private militias had risen up. Now, the private militias were there for 2 reasons. They were there to attack the strikers, the socialists or communists internally. What they saw as the internal enemy, and to defend the borders against those above all in the east, in Silesia, for example, against those parts, the people who lived there who wanted to secede to Poland, to become part of Poland. Now, World War I came about, ended due to an armistice. Now, an armistice it's just a ceasefire, and the point of having a ceasefire is usually so that both sides can get around the table and try and work out what their problems were in a non-violent manner. However, in November of 1918, it was quite clear that Imperial Germany was in no position to negotiate on anything. And its allies had all pulled out the war. It was being pulled apart by internal problems, revolts, and the Kaiser, the boss, the emperor, he'd packed his bags and cleared off. So I think that this is a matter of presentation. It's a misinterpretation of what had actually happened that led to the conservative backlash that happened in Germany in the 1920s and the 1930s. A misunderstanding of what this armistice actually was. If they called it what it really was, a surrender, then it mightn't have been so bad. And if instead of blaming the Allies, they'd actually blamed the real people who were responsible for this, the likes of Ludendorff or the Kaiser, then it might have been it all mightn't have ended up as it did end up. The failure to understand what ended World War I would lead to millions of deaths being caused when it came to end World War II. And because in 1945 the point had to be made very, very clearly. So the treaty to end the war was presented to the German people not as a ceasefire negotiation, which that they might have wanted and what they might have expected and what the propaganda might have insinuated that they were going to get, but it was a diktat, a dictated peace, harsh terms imposed on the country when it was down. Now, one of the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles was to establish a future strength of the German army to 100,000 men, so therefore there'd be all professional soldiers. Actually, 100,000 men in certain, I don't think that's too bad at all. I mean, if you look at the size of the German army today, with a much bigger population, it was also allowed 15,000 people in the Navy. Mind you, lots of equipment wasn't allowed, such about tanks and submarines and things, and certain types of heavy artillery. And at the same time, there was an inter-allied military control commission, which was to oversee disarmament. Now, the higher officers of the German army were almost uniquely conservatives. These are people who oppose the treaty. They were in a position to undermine the Treaty of Versailles from the outset, and they were able to conceal lots of weapons, ammunition, and equipment. And they would be still available in significant quantities after the war. If you know about the beer hall putsch, for example, you'll know that the Nazis had got their hands on a stack of equipment, or via the Freikorps, and then they'd hidden it in a monastery, and weapons. Control over the weapons potential made the German army, the Reichswehr, which was largely hostile to the Republic, at least the officers were, a significant power factor in a very fragile democracy. In many cases, as well, the Inter-Allied Military Control Commission chose to overlook the fact that all of these weapons were lying around, because they were frightened of communists. They were frightened of having revolts in Germany against from the left. And so therefore, as far as the Allies were concerned, they sort of saw themselves as being very much in line. Their allies were the upper classes in Germany, who were defending not only themselves but also the Western upper classes from the unwashed masses who might suddenly break out in revolt and help themselves to what the wealthy people have. So, in order to combat the danger from the communists, the Reichswehr supported various associations with money, weapons, ammunition, equipment, and provided instructors and training facilities. And one of those involved in this process was Adolf Hitler, and what he got up to in 1919. Now, these military organizations were to become what was known as the Black Reichswehr. They were soldiers who were not officially in the army, but who were secretly paid by that. So it was a sort of a territorial army, or what you call them, a National Guard in the United States, which is sort of secret there, that nobody actually knows about it. Now, the government allowed this with a certain amount of reluctance, it would seem, but they did it in such a way as to pretend that these effectively private military companies are labor battalions who in theory were nothing to do with the army whatsoever. They were just doing some work for it. So this is the beginning of the idea of a secret army, a Black Reichswehr. Now, there are those who will argue that the Black Reichswehr was not the entire mass of the non-official military organizations, but just a private military company belonging to Major Bruno Buchrucker. This company got an order from Wehrkreiskommando 3, that is to say the army districts in the Berlin-Brandenburg area, to clean up, sort out, destroy military equipment. That was the official role, but its real role was that of being a secret army. So in the wake of the fall of the Kaiser, all sorts of private organizations sprung up, and their role was to combat revolutionaries at home. And they were called the Freikorps, and they had various names. And I've mentioned them in various things. But I mean, for example, during the putsch of the Hitler putsch in 1923, for example, you see the Oberland Freikorps as being one of them. Or you've got those in Upper Silesia, there's quite a lot. The Selbstschutz Oberschließen, for example. And when the borders in the east were sorted out, that many of these men who were in these Freikorps, or in the Baltics, for example, as well, they didn't return to their pre-war jobs, but they stayed in the military, and they were recruited by the Black Reichswehr. Now, another thing that needs to be pointed out is that during in all wars, you get a situation where that men have to leave their jobs, and then women take over. And this happened above all in the First World War, and then happens in others. In many cases, when the men came back from the wars, in some cases, they couldn't expect the women just to stop doing whatever they were doing. That's number one. Number two is the jobs didn't exist because the companies had gone bankrupt, or because for the economic conditions at the time, there was no one to actually run the company, because the people were no longer alive. So there were these problems related with unemployment which occurred. So people just stayed in the army, because there's one good thing about the army: it always gives you something to eat. So by the summer of 1923, contrary to the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles, Black Reichswehr had been created. It had a permanent corps of possibly around 2,000 men, and a further 18,000 men on standby. They say these were sometimes soldiers. They weren't always there, or maybe they were, but they were theoretically digging trenches and building whatever soldiers need to be built. Now, there are figures quoted that put the number of people in on standby is up to 80,000, which is almost going to double the size of the armed forces. And these men came largely from nationalist groups and had received military training in 4 to 6 week courses, and as well as whatever they'd learned during their period in these Freikorps. Now, if you compare this to the size of the German army, it might actually sound like much, but another thing, the German army had was deployed against to defend the borders, or against invasions and things like this. The Black Reichswehr was, above all, the aim of this was against internal enemies. That's to say, and normally from the left, because it wasn't used ever against the enemies from the nationalist right. So the Reichswehr generals, quite naturally, denied the existence of the Black Reichswehr, and this, given their conservative background, I can't think of a single general at the time who came from a working class background. There may be one or two, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. So these people were normally the landed gentry. They had stacks of cash behind them, and this was their idea of serving their country, was to ensure that their landed estates weren't touched. So these people, I can understand that, but it was also denied by Otto Karl Gessler. He was the Reichswehr minister from the 27th of March 1920 to the 19th of January 1928. Now, Gessler was not a conservative. He was a member of the progressive left liberal German Democratic Party, the DDP. Now, the head of the Black Reichswehr was the chief of staff of the 3rd Division in Berlin. and he was Fedor von Bock. You will have heard of him probably because of his role in the campaigns in the Second World War, above all the campaign in southern Russia in 1942. The person who appointed him to look after the was General Hans von Seeckt, who was chief of the army command. Now, von Bock himself, actually, with hindsight, and got lots. So this is about hindsight. He may seem to be a really odd choice because, first of all, he had refused to take part in the Cap Putsch in 1919, and later, and this is hindsight, he was very ambivalent towards the Nazis. Attempts were made to win him over for the Putsch of 1944. He refused, but he didn't report the attempts to get him to join. So he knew about it, but he did nothing. He did nothing about it. In brackets, von Bock was the only field marshal to actually, I think he was the only field marshal to be killed in action, and he was killed 2nd of May, or was it 2nd or 3rd of May, 1945, in a British plane. Strafed him, and he died of his wounds. Anyway, so going back to 1923, the practical organization of these work commandos was the responsibility of Major Bruno Ernst Buchrucker and his sidekick, First Lieutenant Paus. And they had been doing this since 1921. Wehrkreis Commando 3, so the army command for the Berlin-Brandenburg area, was based in Kurfürstenstrasse 63 in Berlin. And these work commandos had a civilian contract, although allegedly for labor tasks. This was I think it's a private military company anyway. So Buchrucker and Schultz had both had experience in the German Freikorps campaigns in the Baltics. They'd taken part in the Cap Putsch, and they looked for recruits amongst the various Freikorps units, and that would ensure that they were nationalistic enough for them. And this, because of this experience, they actually recruited people amongst the largest Freikorps groups in northern Germany, such as the Rossbach Freikorps, the Erhard Marine Brigade, and also a successor organization which was called Organization Consul, which was a terrorist organization responsible for a number of murders. They had various sub-commanders, so that by the time of the Austrian Putsch, September 1923, there were 23 groups of these Black Reichswehr around the German capital. And I think it'd be fair to say that they were politically united, and their aim was to overthrow the government and replace it with some type of nationalist dictatorship. Now, the Black Reichswehr also received financial support from large landowners, particularly from the Brandenburg Homeland League, and there were other illegal or semi-legal or illegal formations in Bavarian Thuringia. In the autumn of 1923, a state of emergency was declared in Thuringia due to strikes and labor unrest, and these workers were sort of fighting against the authorities, it was the Black Reichswehr forces from Bavaria which was actually sent there to get rid of assassinate the leaders of the working organizations. Now, without a doubt, as far as I think, is that the biggest threat to democracy in Germany in 1923 was the Black Reichswehr. It was not Hitler. That was just Hitler was a minor inconvenience, and the coup itself. The Kustrian coup. Sorry, I shouldn't use the Polish word. When the trial actually took place, now Buchrucker claimed that the Black Reichswehr had 18,000 men under his command in the Berlin area alone. Now, Walter Stennis was a SA leader. He became quite famous later because Hitler had him killed in the night of the long knives. But he in August 23 he said at the trial in October of 23 that at the end of August 23 had been a meeting attended by Ludendorff, Hitler, Buchrucker and others, and Stennis of course, and the plan originally had been that the Black Reichswehr would initiate a coup in the north or at the capital, and Hitler would sort of have a coup his units in Bavaria. Sorry, I just said that he said that at the trial of. That's not correct. That's incorrect. Sorry, I take that one back. In other military areas in Germany, the Black Reichswehr was directly under the command of the army because in the Berlin area it had a lot of independence, and that was what made the coup actually possible. I see that in my opinion, the Black Reichswehr was something which could have, which did form the basis of the future Nazi Party. When it came for them to surrender after this coup, there was things sent to Parliament which on the 1st and 2nd of October 1923, and it would seem that the men in the Black Reichswehr, they didn't really have a clue what was actually going on. One thing I have to make absolutely clear is that if there were 80,000 men in the Black Reichswehr, which I doubt, but let's keep the figures nice and easy, that still represents less than 1% of all the men who were in the German army at the time. And the fact that they were there, why were they there? Well, some of them might have been nationalist nutters, but I would suggest that the majority were there because the army fed people, and they would have got some money. It wasn't a great deal of money. Indeed, when some of them were disarmed in Döberitz, which is Döberitz, which is the south of Berlin, they were given some money. I think it was 150 million marks, which sounds like a stack of cash, but it isn't very much because of the inflation at the time. And they were given clothing, and then they said they could join the normal army if they wanted to. So there was this possibility, but many of them were totally disillusioned of this coup. In fact, even getting mixed up in the coup, according to the reports that were sent at the time. Now, thing is, this needs to be pointed out. There were those who were from the lunatic right, and a number of them did, because this organization, Consul terrorist organization, killed a number of people. Alleged traitors within the party and others, and the way they actually killed people was usually extremely brutal. Maybe they kidnap somebody, put a sack over their head, and then beat them with iron rods or bits of wood or whatever. And this type of killing actually was very common in the early concentration camps. And it seems to me that many of these people, the more extreme ones, ended up in the SA, and they're from there into the Nazi system. Whereas in Germany, certain military training was banned, but there were ways of training people indirectly. I'll give you one or two examples. For example, in university sports clubs, and so the government provided gliders. And the point of this, if you've got a glider, and it's easier to train somebody to fly a fighter plane if you can already glide a glider, or sailboats, because it's easier once you've learned how to sail than if you can put them in charge of a ship of some kind, or all sorts of dual use technologies as well. It's things that we actually see today, so with sanctions against Russia, but you see lots of like components for fridges which can be put into missiles, and this type of thing. And so there was a lot of this in Weimar Germany. This is obviously before Hitler came to power. Right. So anyway, I think that there were those who joined because of the stab in the back myth. They wanted to blame somebody for the unemployment that occurred as a result of the First World War, the initial recession. Obviously, things never got back to as well as they were before or maybe the economy by about 1928 was equivalent to that around 1913. But the why people would want to join, I believe, above all, it's to actually get fed. Anyway, so I would, in conclusion, I'd say this: I've got lots of biographies of Nazis, and so in the career path is nearly always the same. So you've got World War One, the violence of World War One. You've got the violence of the Freikorps. You end up from there again the Black Reichswehr. Then you get more violence in the SA and the SS, and from there it ends up in all sorts of criminal activity. Many of these people, the Freikorps units, the Erhard Marine Brigade, the Rostbach Combat Organization, etc., these were things, organizations which people were in before they joined things like the SA and the SS. Anyway, so there you go. I'm going to do a longer video on this subject, and I hope you found that of interest. Let's now have a look at some of the comments. If anybody wants to say anything, they can do so. So anyway, hello Craig, David, John's in Tacoma, Washington, and sorry, John says about the shot for rabies was wicked, right in the stomach. No, I've got to point this one out. This is what I felt, because even the police said to me, they said, he did this sort of a gesture. And that's how I remembered it as well, is because when I was in the army, they said about, you really have to have some kind of protection against rabies and things. And because this a person said to me, yeah, well, last week we had a film on it, and it looked very unpleasant. And anyway, so when he said this to me, but having said that, I thought that it was more the worry about it rather than the fear of it. But anyway, it's just a little injection. It just as anything. It's not. I mean, okay. I slept yesterday. I slept longer than I sleep normally, but I think I did on Friday as well. But the rabies shot wasn't. It was okay. It wasn't. I also had to have a tetanus shot as well. And I've got to repeat that twice. Anyway, sorry. There we go. And Ben said, "Did we lose the feed?" I don't know. You might have done. And anyway. Donald Duck writes, planned, Germany rebuilt it and had made the global banking industry export was the difference to make positive pacify outcome compared to after World War One. Well, I missed that one. I can't. And Treaty of Versailles 1929 down economically was for the starving populations of strongman elections. Then it was the only way to be fed. Yes, yes, that's a fair enough comment. That is actually. Is that you get the idea of the strong person. I mean, in the 1929, the economic effects of it, and in many countries, the benefits are not like today's, and the other social things again not like today's. It really it made it very easy for the those promising to have all sorts of solutions. And in fact, they didn't have any solutions to actually come to power. I think there's a very clear path from what happened in 1929 to what happened in 1933, in my opinion. Ben says it's been a great video. Don't know enough about the Black Reichswehr. We'll check what sources you share. Thanks. Okay, right. Well, okay. There you go. I did this video actually because it was something that was related to something else I wrote on them. I started writing something on the Tilsit Einsatzkommando, which was the first Einsatzkommando to start murdering people. And that there was not so far from here. It was in Lithuania, and they left Tilsit, which is today Sovetsk in Kaliningrad Oblast, and they murdered people just over the border in Lithuania. So I started preparing for that, and then which led me on to so the way it led me on this plot to assassinate Himmler, allegedly, which led me on to the Black Reichswehr, and so that's how this came up. So it's sort of very indirectly. I might do tomorrow, or if I do want a video tomorrow, I'll do one on the plot to assassinate Himmler, or the attempt to assassinate Himmler in 1934. So thanks very much for listening. Thanks for being here today, and all the best from me in Poland, near the Lithuanian border. So bye for now.